The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen, you have just taught me everything I know about Sean Duffy. And in all of the things that we've got to deal with here, I haven't gotten to him. And I know people are familiar with him, and I have no idea why, because reality television is, of course, one of the poisons that doesn't come my way. And
I
so,
watched Road Rules for you. I can brief you on it
okay,
anytime.
well, below deck sailing yacht, okay, that's the only one I've actually spent some time with. But
Oh,
okay, so that's who Sean Duffy is. Okay, great. Now I know, and we understand completely, I guess, why Donald Trump chose him. Sure.
but obviously, he's eminently qualified. He's done a bang up job.
hmm
It did all the reasons why Trump picks anyone in his cabinet or gives them more jobs.
Jen, we have some breaking Trump illegal and unconstitutional tariff news. During your hour, Donald Trump decided that Canada, for no sane reason, should now be hit, all goods coming from Canada, with an additional 35% tariff. And this is one of the many that Donald Trump, according to these letters he's sending around to different countries, will, as he threatens, start on August 1st. So that gives Donald Trump about 20 days to cave on this and to become, the Donald Trump, the Trump always chickens out guy, the taco guy that Wall Street believes he is. The markets are already reacting very, very badly to this overnight. So Donald Trump may very well chicken out of this one by noontime tomorrow. But that's his latest Trump tariff madness, an additional 35% on Canada starting August 1st. And so we will see what happens when CNBC starts reporting on the markets tomorrow morning. And if we get to noontime with the kind of crash that could create, we could expect maybe Donald Trump chickens out sooner rather than later.
That seems to be the plan. I suspect you're going to tell us how he's not going to get to 20 deals in 20 days or whatever
Yeah,
thing he's going to tell us
the
he's going to do tomorrow.
the 90 deals in 90 days passed without a single deal. Some people make the mistake of pretending that some of these so-called agreements, which are not agreements that he has with Britain and other places, a couple of them, they are not trade deals, as you know.
Nope.
Actual trade deals have to be passed by Congress. That's what makes them law. It's not a deal if it's not law. It has no meaning at all. And every one of Donald Trump's letters to these countries, every one of them in the last line says, and I, Donald Trump, can change any of these tariffs at any time, depending on, and this is the word he uses, our relationship with that country. So Donald Trump is going to judge how the relationship is going, and you might just get a tariff from your boyfriend, Donald Trump, if he doesn't like how the relationship is going.
Or daddy, if you want to call him
Which
that, I suppose.
we've gone too far with that example. Let's get out of that right now, Jen. Thank you, Jen.
All right, Lawrence, have a good show.
Thank you. They can do that to anyone. Many people have said that since Donald Trump has ordered people snatched out of their homes or off the streets in this country and shipped off to foreign countries, sometimes countries that person has never visited. I, for one, wasn't sure that was true the first time I heard that statement. Surely that couldn't happen to someone who was in the United States legally. But then it did. And then I said that it could happen to anyone. I never would have thought that it would have happened to Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was the subject of a court order saying that he specifically could not be deported to El Salvador, and then Donald Trump deported him to El Salvador. And when it was discovered to be a mistake, one lawyer in the Justice Department admitted in court that it was a mistake, and that lawyer got fired. And now that lawyer is saying they can do that to anyone. And that lawyer is the most credible source you can possibly hear on what they can do to you. And he says they can do that to anyone. That's how real it is. That's how much reason you have to begin considering always having your passport with you, always being able to prove that you're a citizen of this country. For years now, the United States government has been issuing traditional full-size passports and this is important now, more important than ever, passport cards, which are about the size of driver's licenses. They look like driver's licenses and are available for $30 from the passport agency, and they work as passports. With Canada and Mexico, they don't work as passports everywhere in the world, but they would be accepted as identification as for you being a United States citizen in this country. And as a public service announcement tonight, if you don't have one of those passport cards, now is a very good time to apply for one. You should always have to have it in your pocket now in the United States of America, because the United States of America has finally become that place where you might have to show your papers if masked men carrying weapons of war jump out of unmarked vans and try to drag you into one of those vans. They can do that to anyone. Those chilling words that we used to hear in movie dialogue about Nazis, "Papers, please," are now more chilling than ever, because we now live in a country where if you don't have the ability to prove you're a citizen at all times in your pocket, they can do that to you, because they can do that to anyone. The lawyer who admitted in court that Kilmar Abrego Garcia was removed from this country by mistake is named Erez Raveni. He lost his job in the Trump Justice Department for telling a federal judge the truth. That is a reason you can be fired by Donald Trump's Justice Department, telling a judge the truth. Prior to Donald Trump's Justice Department, you could be fired from your job in the Justice Department if you did not tell a judge the truth. Erez Raveni has now become a whistleblower who has informed the Senate Judiciary Committee about the workings of the Justice Department and defying judges' orders under the guidance of the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General Emil Bove, whose previous job was Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer. And just a couple of months of serving in Donald Trump's Justice Department, doing Donald Trump's wishes, Donald Trump has nominated Emil Bove for a judgeship on the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. Supreme Court justices usually are chosen from courts of appeals. Emil Bove's elevation to a Federal Circuit Court of Appeals may very well be step one in Donald Trump's plan to put his last criminal defense lawyer on the United States Supreme Court for the next 40 or 50 years. Emil Bove is 44 years old, and Emil Bove has proved he will do anything for his former criminal defendant client, Donald Trump. Politico obtained emails and text messages turned over to the Senate Judiciary Committee and published them on the Politico website today. Politico reports the newly released messages reinforce claims by whistleblower Erez Raveni that Emil Bove played a key role in a decision by Trump administration immigration officials to turn scores of Venezuelan immigrants over to El Salvador's government, despite a U.S. judge's order not to do so. Many of the messages pertain to an extraordinary showdown on March 15th, when immigrant rights lawyers persuaded a federal judge in Washington, James Boasberg, to order the administration to halt an in-progress deportation of 130 Venezuelans to El Salvador. Boasberg ordered that planes containing the men who Trump deemed alien enemies under a wartime law be turned around if necessary, and in any event that the men not be handed over to the Salvadoran government. The messages show that in the hours after Boasberg's ruling, Raveni repeatedly relayed to colleagues that the immigrants covered by the judge's order should not be turned over to El Salvador. The material included emails saying, quote, "The judge specifically ordered us to not remove anyone in the class and to return anyone in the air. No one subject to the Alien Enemies Act in our custody can be removed, and anyone in the air should be returned unless they have a Title VIII final order. Please confirm receipt and let us know what, if anything, is happening." When Erez Raveni heard nothing in response, he texted a colleague at the Justice Department saying, quote, "Guess we're going to say F you to the court. Super." To which his colleague responded, quote, "Well, Pamela Jo Bondi is, not you." Politico notes that in one of the newly disclosed emails, the acting head of the Justice Department's Civil Division told Erez Raveni that the men were transported to El Salvador and delivered to that prison in El Salvador based on legal advice given by Emil Bove. The email says, quote, I have been told by the Office of the Deputy Attorney General that the Principal Associate Deputy Attorney General, Emil Bove, advised DHS last night that the deplaning of the flights that had departed U.S. airspace prior to the court's minute order was permissible under the law and the court's order. A few days later, Erez Raveni texted a colleague, quote, at this point, why don't we just submit an emoji of a middle finger as our filing? In an interview with the New York Times today, Erez Raveni said this, if they can do this sort of thing to Abrego Garcia, to 238 people that nobody knows, and send them to CCOT forever with no due process, they can do that to anyone, said Mr. Raveni. It should be deeply worrisome to anyone who cares about their safety and their liberty that the government can, without showing evidence to anyone of anything, spirit you away on a plane to wherever, forever. To wherever, forever. They can do that to anyone. Erez Raveni told the New York Times the Department of Justice is thumbing its nose at the courts and putting Justice Department attorneys in an impossible position where they have to choose between loyalty to the agenda of the president and their duty to the court. The New York Times reported on Erez Raveni's motivation as a whistleblower. Mr. Raveni said he came forward for reasons larger than Mr. Bove's judicial nomination, concerned by what he described as a degradation of the principles of honesty to the courts that have long guided the Justice Department. He noted that he has never been a member of a political party and spent the first Trump administration zealously defending its immigration policies in court. But what the administration has sought to do in recent months was far different, he said, a deliberate strategy of deceiving and disregarding federal judges. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee, will join us to consider what this new information means for the Senate's upcoming vote on Emil Bove's confirmation. The most important new development today in the turbulent sea of government chaos, confusion, and lawlessness unleashed by the inauguration of Donald Trump is that a federal district court judge in New Hampshire, appointed by Republican President George W. Bush, has said no to Donald Trump and issued a nationwide injunction to stop Donald Trump's most blatant violation of the Constitution. The ruling comes 13 days after the United States Supreme Court struck down a nationwide injunction issued by another federal district court judge on the same subject, Donald Trump's unconstitutional executive order denying birthright citizenship to babies born in this country whose parents are not citizens. The problem with Donald Trump's executive order is, of course, that the United States Constitution says in clear English that all babies born in this country have a right to citizenship, except in the very few cases involving babies born to diplomats and other personnel from foreign countries serving at embassies and elsewhere in the United States. When the Supreme Court struck down another district court judge's nationwide injunction against Donald Trump's executive order ending birthright citizenship, the Supreme Court specifically said that the only way a nationwide injunction could be issued by a federal district court judge in such a case or in any other case is that the judge would first have to certify a class action lawsuit, which is exactly what Judge Joseph LaPlante did in that New Hampshire case. The class of plaintiffs that Judge LaPlante certified as legitimate class action plaintiffs are babies born in the United States who could be denied citizenship by Donald Trump's order. Those babies have pseudonyms in the lawsuit, first names only. Page 5. Petitioner Sarah is the daughter of petitioner Susan, a citizen of Taiwan. Susan and Sarah reside in Utah. Susan has lived in the United States for 12 years. She is currently in the United States on a student visa and is in the process of applying for lawful permanent resident status based on an approved employment-based visa. Her husband, the father of her children, is not a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident. Susan gave birth to Sarah in Utah in April 2025 and applied for a United States passport for the child. She has 3 other children, all of whom are U.S. citizens. The judge describes other babies who are the plaintiffs in this class action case. And in the judge's 38-page ruling today, most of the 38 pages describes why those babies are certified as a class under the class action rules. The judge wrote, "This court has no hesitation determining this situation warrants emergency injunctive relief and class certification. The executive order would reverse a nationally known and recognized government policy in place for over a century and affect thousands of families." Judge LaPlante wrote, "Petitioners will likely succeed in claiming that the executive order violates the 14th Amendment. The 3 other district courts assessing the constitutionality of the executive order also found that the plaintiffs would likely succeed. The executive order flouts the plain language of the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, conflicts with binding Supreme Court precedent, and runs counter to our nation's 250-year history of citizenship by birth. The denial of citizenship to the plaintiff's members' children would render the children either undocumented non-citizens or stateless entirely. The children would risk deportation to countries they have never visited. The loss of birthright citizenship, even if temporary and later restored at the conclusion of litigation, has cascading effects that would cut across a young child's life and the life of that child's family, very likely leaving permanent scars. Donald Trump doesn't care about those scars. Emil Bove doesn't care about those scars. Everyone working with and for Donald Trump to try to rip out a clause of the Constitution and hurt those babies does not care about leaving permanent scars. In court today, Judge LaPlante said that birthright citizenship is, quote, "the greatest privilege that exists in the world." Joining us now is Cody Wofsy, Deputy Project Director of the ACLU Immigrants' Rights Project. He is the lead lawyer in this New Hampshire case. Tell us what happened in court today and how the judge arrived at where this is, and will this nationwide injunction hold?
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. This is a huge win for all of the children nationwide who've already been born and who are going to be born every single day, who are potentially subject to this executive order. Their citizenship is on the line. They're facing arrest, deportation, and denial of absolutely critical early life nutrition and health care. And so it is gratifying, and it's exactly legally correct to see the judge issue class certification as well as the preliminary injunction. This is really not a complicated class certification issue. This is precisely the kind of case that the federal rules say can be certified as a class. And as you pointed out, every single court to look at this issue has agreed that this order is gravely unconstitutional in addition to being cruel and unjust. Now, will it hold? We have little doubt that the Trump administration will fight, will take the case up on appeal. We don't know yet whether they will seek an emergency stay, maybe all the way up to the Supreme Court. But the bottom line is, on the procedural questions of class action and on the substantive questions of the constitutionality, our case is extremely strong, and we have every expectation that we're going to prevail.
Judge LaPlante put in writing in his 38 pages today that he expects the Supreme Court to make the final ruling here. This was by him in no sense any kind of defiance of the Supreme Court. It read to me as if he was following the precise roadmap that the Supreme Court laid out in its recent ruling 13 days ago, saying you can only do this through a class action case.
That's exactly right. We really understand the Supreme Court's decision to have given a roadmap, a marching orders even, for how it is you should go about getting this kind of broad relief. And it just makes sense in a case like this. You have children spread all over the country, um, and this exact same order is applying to them, the exact same kinds of injuries, stripping away their citizenship. Like I said, that's what class actions were designed to do. And there's no reason to force 50 or 100 or 200 different duplicative lawsuits when there's really just the one issue: is this order constitutional or not? We know it's not. And at the end of the day, it's likely the Supreme Court will weigh in and will say exactly the same thing.
The Trump White House issued a statement saying that you have defied the Supreme Court, when in fact, as we just said, the judge in the case is saying he expects the Supreme Court to take this up and to hear this. The Supreme Court specifically stayed its own decision for 30 days, specifically to give you a chance and to give others a chance around the country to file this kind of lawsuit. That's pretty much what they said in the reason they delayed their own decision taking effect.
I think it's extremely telling that the government, took this case up to the Supreme Court, did not argue the actual constitutional merits to the Supreme Court, probably because they know how weak their case is on the merits. And what we saw is a full Supreme Court argument, a written decision, scores of pages of opinions from all the different justices, and not one justice indicated that they thought that this executive order on the merits was constitutional. I think that speaks volumes. And I think you're exactly right. Nobody wanted this order to go into effect because it is such a blatant violation of the Constitution.
You were personally, as well as the other lawyers involved on your side of the case, personally certified today by a federal judge as the competent counsel to properly represent this entire class of babies all over the country. So you now have thousands of clients by the definition of this class tonight who don't even know about this case, in addition to Sarah and the other babies who are mentioned in writing by the judge. What should all those families out there know about what you accomplished for them today?
You're absolutely right. And it's a privilege and a responsibility to represent this class. We, since the Supreme Court's decision has come down, we have gotten just scores of emails, phone calls to us, to our affiliates, to our co-counsel, to our partners, explaining just how terrified people are, how confused they are. People asking us, do I need to move to another state and leave my OBGYN and my family behind so that my child can be protected by one of these other injunctions? What can I do to protect my child from deportation? What can I do to stop my family from being torn apart? So our message today is to everyone impacted by this executive order, to all the families out there who have been scared, who've been confused. This order protects you. This order means that your child is going to be recognized as a U.S. citizen, as the Constitution guarantees. The fight's not over. The litigation will continue. The Trump administration may try to put this on hold. We will fight them every step of the way, and we have every confidence that we'll.
Cody Wofsy, thank you very much for defending the Constitution, defending those babies, and for explaining it all to us tonight.
Thanks so much for having me.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse will join us after this break. Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson is worried.
What keeps you up at night?
I would say the state of our democracy.
Amen to that.
I would say that I am really very interested in getting people to focus and to invest and to pay attention to what is happening in our country and in our government.
That was Justice Jackson speaking today. Justice Jackson, appointed by President Biden, will probably serve another 30 years or so on the United States Supreme Court. And if Clarence Thomas conveniently retires during the Trump presidency, Justice Jackson could spend the rest of her years on the Supreme Court, sitting beside Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, Emil Bove, or some other outrageous potential Trump nominee for the Supreme Court. Joining our discussion now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the top Democrat on the subcommittee for federal courts on that committee. Senator Whitehouse, I'm struck by a couple of things. That question, what keeps you up at night, never used to be asked of judges, especially Supreme Court justices. You'd ask a defense secretary, you'd ask a CIA director, maybe you'd ask a president, but not a Supreme Court justice. So there's the question, which is quite remarkable. And then there's the answer, which is the state of our democracy. And for the kids watching out there, I don't know about you, Senator, but in a lifetime of listening to Supreme Court justices, I have never heard such a question and answer and never expected to.
Yeah, nor have I. It was a pretty remarkable moment, but then it's quite a remarkable time that we're in. And I think Justice Jackson is being properly responsive to the obvious concerns about the state of our democracy. And so, bravo her.
And Senator, the Emil Bove nomination for a Circuit Court of Appeals strikes me as very possibly step one in Donald Trump's plan to put that 44, currently now 44-year-old man on the Supreme Court for many decades.
Well, your theme this evening has been about lawlessness. And this guy really embodies lawlessness. He was neck deep in that quid pro quo scheme to hang a prosecution over the head of Mayor Eric Adams of New York, to coerce the mayor into going along with Trump's immigration and enforcement policies. He was neck deep in the DOJ scheme to cook up a fake criminal investigation, to give a fake basis for trying to seize funds that were going to climate change and green groups that they didn't like. And we've seen him now in this recent episode talk about the need, if judges don't let the Trump administration deport as Trump wants, to tell federal courts F you to a court order. That's pretty sharp lawlessness when you're telling a judge F you about their court order. So this guy is wreathed in lawlessness. And the only thing that keeps him alive is the sense of anxiety and fear, I think, that a lot of our Republican colleagues are fearing. A.G. Bondi and the deputy came to his hearing to sit in the back and glower at the Republicans and make sure that they were, all in a row. It was like a scene out of a mobster movie.
Yeah, and you have Republican Tom Tillis on the Judiciary Committee who's decided not to run for re-election, and anyone who was thinking that was going to free him up, he's already said he will probably vote for Emil Bove on the Senate floor, vote for his confirmation, which is about a week from now.
Well, not so fast. Let's wait and see. I think that the report from the prosecutor Huberman was pretty damning. And the only response that the department had was, he's a disgruntled employee and he's lying. And then all of these documents were released that are unbelievable corroboration of his initial statement. I mean, corroboration right down the line, including multiple references to Bovee having said F you, contemporaneous, live action references. You really don't get better corroboration than that. And so I think it's going to be really awkward for the Republicans to ignore that entire body of evidence. I mean, it's one thing to ignore all the evidence around Kavanaugh when he's going straight onto the Supreme Court, but this guy's a little bit more of a problem.
Yeah, but as Donald Trump's former criminal defense lawyer, I suspect there's no one he could choose for the Supreme Court that he would trust more than Emil Bovee.
No, I think there would be a real method on Trump's part to the madness of putting this character onto the Third Circuit first and then onto the Supreme Court. But the motives are evil ones, and the whole circumstance is so apparently bad, including that now with this additional information, this corroboration, it looks very much like Emil Bovee lied under oath in his hearing, thinking that he could get away with it because the Republicans were going to give him cover by allowing him not to answer questions. And then this came up.
And Senator, again, this is one of those frames that I think we should come back to every once in a while. You and I both know that prior to Donald Trump taking over the Republican Party, this kind of information would instantly destroy a Republican nominee for a position on the judiciary appointed by a Republican president, even if the Republicans had full control of the United States Senate. They would almost all instantly turn against that nominee.
Correct. And we have statements from Republicans on the committee, including the chairman, that are basically saying exactly what we are saying, that we need answers to these questions. We deserve answers. You can't hide behind privileges that A, don't apply, and B, you haven't even asserted properly. And, they're really walking themselves into a very tight corner. So next, Thursday's vote, I guess, is going to be really telling. And there's going to be a lot of pressure on them to put this deeply morally, legally, and ethically unqualified person onto a court.
Senator Whitehouse, we have to squeeze in a commercial break here. If you could please stay with us. I want to get your reaction to Donald Trump's Homeland Security Secretary and the FEMA response, the delayed FEMA response to that deadly flooding in Texas, the predictably deadly flooding in Texas. We'll be right back with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. At a Trump cabinet meeting this week, Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem said this about FEMA's response to the deadly flooding in Texas.
We as a federal government don't manage these disasters. The state does. We come in and support them. And that's exactly what we did here in this situation. FEMA went to an enhanced level immediately, and we're still there in presence, and FEMA's been deployed, and we're cutting through the paperwork of the old FEMA, streamlining it much like your vision of how FEMA should operate. And it's been a much better response to help these families get through this terrible situation.
CNN reports Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, whose department oversees FEMA, recently enacted a sweeping rule aimed at cutting spending. Every contract and grant over $100,000 now requires her personal sign-off before any funds can be released. As Central Texas towns were submerged in rising waters, FEMA officials realized they couldn't pre-position urban search and rescue crews from a network of teams stationed regionally across the country. FEMA officials realized they needed Noem's approval before sending those additional assets. Noem didn't authorize FEMA's deployment of urban search and rescue teams until Monday, more than 72 hours after the flooding began, multiple sources told CNN. The top Democrat on the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, is back with us. Senator, more incompetence, this time deadly incompetence.
Yeah, bad incompetence. And in a really weird way, it belies everything that you just showed Secretary Noem saying. Cutting through the paperwork, No, they established new paperwork to blockade expenditures over $100,000. And then being responsive, everybody in the world was looking at the Guadalupe River. Everybody in the world was frightened for those children and hoping for the best and praying. How is it possible that when the search and rescue teams that are supposed to be headed there are blocked up behind this new Trump red tape, nobody thinks, well, let's pick that one out of the pile? So, I mean, the level of incompetence and malpractice is just stunning.
And Senator, you don't have to be an environmental expert to know how predictable and likely flooding is in that area, an area known as Flash Flood Alley. Shouldn't there have been more preparedness at every level here?
Well, obviously, as the casualties that we've tragically seen have shown, but what we've also seen is the Trump administration going in exactly the opposite direction, trying to undo the National Weather Service, trying to undo and even disappear FEMA, trying to interfere with NOAA and NASA, the other agencies that help gather data, trying to prevent Department of Defense weather data from getting shared. So the entire structure that we have built, a very, very impressive structure for putting together weather predictions so that people can be properly warned, essentially every single piece of that is being attacked or disabled or intended to be destroyed by the Trump administration. So them talking to each other as if they're normal people in a normal time doing their jobs is just bonkers. They are completely focused on destroying the apparatus that we need.
Senator, where does this thinking come from? Where does the thinking come from that, well, weather reporting, weather forecasting really shouldn't be as accurate as it is?
I can't prove it, but when you look at how the fossil fuel industry directs every single thing that it cares to in the Trump administration, I think it's hard not to put the blame for this back on the fossil fuel industry. They know that when people talk about the weather and give weather warnings, they're going to talk about climate change now. It's too obvious and too widely known not to. So they go right at it, trying to attack our weather reporting and research services, because when they come to tell us and warn us, they're going to be talking about climate change. And those are words that are so heretical in Trump land that they won't even let federal agencies use them.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Coming up, we're going to hear more from what Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson had to say today, including what surprised her about her new workplace when Joe Biden sent her off to her new job at the United States Supreme Court. That's next. During the 2020 presidential campaign, candidate Joe Biden said if he had a vacancy to fill in the United States Supreme Court, he would appoint a black woman. He kept that promise, and former public defender Ketanji Brown Jackson moved up from her position as a federal appeals court judge to the United States Supreme Court, where she encountered some surprises.
I'm sitting up on the bench and looking out for the first time was pretty extraordinary. I think I didn't realize how formal the court really is. I kind of thought maybe when the justices go into conference, they let their hair down a little bit, no, no.
That's a hard no.
We speak in order, seniority order. We vote in seniority order. We shake each other's hands every time in a ritual that we do before going out to the bench, or if we're just having a conference day before conference, every time. And so it's kind of interesting and neat, but it's quite a formal institution. But then there are some times when, even after the principal dissent is written, I have a slightly different perspective, or a different take on something, or this is an issue of particular importance to me for whatever reason, where I will say, forgive me, Justice Sotomayor, but I need to write on this case. And it's because I feel like I might have something to offer and something to add, and I'm not afraid to use my voice.
Today, Justice Jackson, in that discussion, described how her experience as a public defender informed her approach to her work when she was confirmed to her first judicial appointment as a federal district court judge who presided over trials.
That experience stayed with me as a judge because I decided very early on that I was going to focus on communicating with the defendants who came before me in the courtroom. That, they might not agree with what ultimately happened to them if I sentenced them or whatever, but they weren't going to be confused about the process. And so I would script out my sentencings, and I had steps, and I would say, Mr. So-and-so, this is a sentencing. This is what's going to happen. Here are the steps. Do you have any questions? I can answer them, because I felt that it was so important to treat the people who came before me with respect, because it was crucial for their rehabilitation.
And here again is the comment Justice Jackson made in that discussion that has captured so much attention today.
What keeps you up at night?
I would say the state of our democracy.
And it has.
I would say that I am really very interested in getting people to focus and to invest and to pay attention to what is happening in our country and in our government.
We'll be right back. You might not realize this, but I actually cannot see what you see on your TV screen during this program, including graphics that have misspellings, which sometimes happen, and other things. And people on Twitter and other social media are always asking me, how did you let that happen? It's because I have no idea what's on the screen other when I'm talking to the camera. And apparently tonight, earlier in the hour, there was a wrong photo up there at one point during a graphic presentation on screen. And of course, we always regret those errors. We promise that errors like that will happen again. And we promise I won't know when they're happening, but the control room will tell me before the end of the program, and let me tell you. That is tonight's last word.